Hello, CBM junkies, and welcome to the latest episode of Comic Book Movie Reports. I am your host, Chad Miller. So, as many of you know, Disney has acquired 20th Century Fox, and most of us are excited because we get to have the X-Men and the Fantastic Four introduced into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, there's been a lot of speculation as far as how this is going to happen, who should be cast, and there are so many videos out on the interwebs about those issues. So, in this episode, I'm going to nail down who I think should be cast as the main characters, how the first movie should play out, and how it ties into everything about the MCU as we know it. So, I believe that the movie should start out with Nick Fury and Mariah Hill. And this is going to be set well before anything about the Avengers takes place, well before the Avengers Initiative. So S.H.I.E.L.D., technically Hydra, has actually detained a few mutants. Now, nobody knows what a mutant is. They're all trying to figure it out. What is going on? They just have a few mutants detained because of certain events that have happened. They don't want the world freaking out, and nobody knows what a superpowered being is as of yet. Be that as it may, Nick Fury incorporates somebody to handle mutants and creates a Department of Mutant Affairs. So that brings in the character of Val Cooper. Now, most casual X-Men fans won't really know who Valerie Cooper is. She was put in charge of the Department of Mutant Affairs in the comics, and I'm not sure that she really has a presence to this day in the comics, as I'm not a fervent reader like I used to be, but she was really kind of cool character, and it was a really nice way to tie in the government's interaction with mutants. So Fury has placed Valerie Cooper in charge of handling mutant issues, which aren't really all that prominent as of yet, but there's obviously going to be more. So we're going to cut forward a little bit ahead in the future, and we're going to see Charles Xavier's school. And here is where the casting comes in. Now, Charles Xavier is obviously already in existence. He's not a departure really from the comics or even the movies per se. And it's such a hard thing to cast this character because he was so wonderfully portrayed by Patrick Stewart and James McAvoy. It's hard to really get that right. But I have one actor in mind who I think could pull it off, and we could also race bend it a little bit. So, my casting choice for Charles Xavier is Mahershala Ali. So, Charles is sitting there and he's watching his first class of mutants. Now, we're going to get a little bit of exposition as far as mutants and who he's recruited so far, and a little bit of the history of Magneto as well. I know that there's going to be a lot of information that is technically already out there, but just in case a casual fan of the MCU has not seen any of the X-Men films, we do need a bit of exposition here, especially in regards to Charles's relationship with Magneto and a few of the other things that I would like to introduce. So, my casting choice for Magneto, and this was also really hard because being portrayed by Ian McKellen and so wonderfully by Michael Fassbender, it is going to be really difficult to recast his character, make him as amazing as he's already been portrayed in the films. But I'm thinking that we could throw in Armie Hammer and bring in a little bit of old Patrick Stewart and the current like nuances of Michael Fassbender and still make him a relative badass Magneto. So, as Xavier is watching his first class of students go through a training exercise, we're going to be introduced to each of the characters. Now, I feel it really important, especially since we know that Kevin Feige is really good about staying true to the comics as much as possible and, like I said, purist kind of form. We should start with the original X-Men. Now, I know most of these characters have already been done, maybe overdone, in the movies, but I feel it's really, really important to hone in on those five core X-Men characters. And here's where the casting begins. Now, we don't need to go into the whole, like, recruiting of each character. I think they should be introduced through action clips primarily. And we're going to start off with Cyclops. And I would like to see him portrayed by KJ Apa, whom most of you know from playing Archie in Riverdale. Now, I'm not really all that well versed on KJ's acting style. I think he'd be a great fit for Cyclops on appearance because he's lean and yet still muscular and hell of attractive. But I think that would be a great aspect for Cyclops because he's nicknamed Slim, and I think that would be a nice casting choice for Cyclops. Now, technically, Iceman was the next one recruited, and this is a very interesting casting choice as I would like to see Colton Haynes play the role. Now, the reason why I say that is because recently Iceman has been outed as a gay character. And I think even though while romance isn't really prominent in the MCU, it would be great to have some inclusion of the LGBTQ communities, have Iceman be gay, and who else better to play Iceman than a gay actor himself? Now, we could also say that Beast has already been with the team well before any of the other X-Men have been recruited, such as what happened with the First Class trilogy. That could either go one way or the other. However, I believe that Beast should be human form, and we don't explore the whole going blue and furry in this first film. So I believe that Beast should be played by Ansel Elgort. Also, with Beast, I think that he should definitely be more bulky, more ape like, if you could say, and with the larger feet, the larger hands, which would require, I think, to fully pull it off, some really good motion capture. And that way, we can get his agility, his smarts, and his awkward appearance all in one. Now, with Angel, he hasn't been really portrayed all that well in the movies thus far. So I think if we can dive back a little bit to explore his vigilantism, his proud mutant heritage, his millionaire playboy background, to have him kind of set up for this movie. Just a little bit of exposition, give a little bit more depth than what we've seen, and then have him played by Taron Egerton. Now, we can have it where it's just the four boys club, and then Jean Grey is introduced just as she is in the comics, and all the boys, except Iceman, fall madly in love with Jean as she is brought to the school. Now, so who I would love to see portraying Jean Grey, my favorite character of all time, the actress is named Cameron Grimes. Now, most of you probably won't know who Cameron is. She plays on the soap opera The Young and the Restless. And she's been existing on that show for quite some time. She went away for a while, grew up, and then came back. She was featured in the early scenes of Magic Mike. However, her acting chops far extend past soap operas. I believe that she could be a definite force in this film and to portray my favorite character aside what has been phenomenally done by Famke Janssen and pretty well done by Sophie Turner. I think Cameron could nail this part, and we don't even have to go into the Phoenix aspects as of yet. If they even do it all, I think she would be great for the part. So, in addition to this early day footage, we're also going to get introduced to a couple other characters that play into the early days of forming the X Men. Now, even though we've already set up the exposition between Charles and Eric, there's also going to be somebody who is standing by Xavier's side, also a mutant, and also a love interest. And that is going to be Amelia Vogt. Now, a lot of people probably won't know who Amelia is, but there was this great story in the comics that really set up this character and her stance on mutant issues. Now, who I would love to see portray Amelia is Sarah Paulson. She is a powerhouse of an actor. And I think with the dynamics of this part, she would absolutely nail it. Bring this character to the forefront because nobody really knows who she is. And have it be a very, very central part of the coming plot. And we're also going to include another character that was prominent in the First Class trilogy, barely introduced in the first trilogy, and that is Moira McTaggart. Now, she needs to be Scottish. So, Charles is obviously a studied student of mutant genetics. So he needs to have a counterpart on his side that knows at least as much as he does, if not a wee bit more. And that's where Moira comes in. She's going to be on Muir Island, continuing her studies on mutant genetics, and she'll even have like a few mutants there on her campus. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to dive into their former romance, but I think there would be a neat little tinge of Amelia being a little bit jealous of Moira, considering that Charles is so connected to her on the mutant level. So we're going to jump in time a little bit further and see that the X-Men are a little bit more developed as a team. We're going to dive into some aspects of how mutants are slowly becoming more prominent in society, what those problems are, and the reasons why mutants are so feared and hated. You know, it could be the students going out into, the normal world and, maybe a power or something slips out and there's a reaction from the general populace, however you want to do that. But this is where the fear and the hatred comes into play. And it would also be really nice to hint at certain other minority groups, such as Charles being an African American, Iceman being gay. It is at this point that, let's say, the X-Men are hanging out in, the living room or something like that, and they're watching television. They witness Tony Stark's outing himself as Iron Man. So this is where we're really setting up where superheroes start coming into play in the MCU and what the X-Men may or may not have as far as a hold on superheroism. So at this point, nothing really major happens as far as like mutants coming out, a huge mutant battle, or anything like that, because we still have to be constrained as far as the rules in the MCU. Like, superheroes are just becoming a thing. So we can't just throw the X-Men in there, do a little retcon, and say that they've been here all this time, even though they have. So this would be a great time to set up a further dynamic with Charles and Eric. And also explore the relationship between Charles and Amelia, because she has views that are a little bit closer to Eric's, but still she holds the fundamentality of Charles. So as the X-Men are training to, defend the world against, bad evil threats like, humanity that doesn't want to accept mutants or even superheroes. They also realize that Magneto is going to be a huge threat. And then the attack on New York happens as seen in the first Avengers movie. And while Charles basically would like the X-Men to help partake in those sort of situations, the X-Men just aren't ready, and humanity is not ready for mutants. So they kind of basically sit idly by and see these events happen. So after the events of the attack on New York, there's a huge blowout between Amelia and Charles. And the position of where Amelia thinks that mutants should, rise up to the cause and take charge and help out. Charles still is a bit restrained. There's a huge blow up between the two of them, and Amelia leaves Charles. So now this is going to lead up to the events in Civil War, the Sokovia Accords, whether superheroes should be registered, so to say, with the government and expose their identities and serve as a government sanctioned team, or if they're going to be renegades, do what they do without, the constraints of the government. Uh, there's obviously going to be a huge debate within the mutant community about that. Magneto's got to say about it. Obviously, Charles has to say about it. That's going to lead to a lot of introspect and dynamics within the team. That way, we're setting up a lot more personality, character developments, and not necessarily having to be in an all-out action sequence. So by the end of this film, the events of Infinity War are basically taking place. Thanos snaps his fingers, wipes out half of the population, but mutants don't get affected. So this is where Magneto takes the opportunity to just go on his uprising. And he hasn't formed the Brotherhood, because I think that necessarily doesn't have a whole lot of weight. Magneto is going to, take on his uprising. This is the time for mutants to dominate the world. And he's formed his acolytes. So, alongside him is Amelia. And that's, something that was portrayed in the comics pretty well. And as far as who else we put into the acolytes, that is going to be up for debate. Not too important at the moment, but the fact is that Amelia is there. Magneto's going to be on the uprising. This is where the X-Men are going to go full on, just not in this film. So with this being said, with Magneto taking a stand publicly and saying, mutants are here, we're going to basically take our claim on the world, it is obvious that S.H.I.E.L.D., even though no longer S.H.I.E.L.D., needs to get involved. And Val Cooper is sent to Xavier's school to talk to him because Charles is the leading expert on mutants. She's got a little bit of a sidekick as far as a partner as, S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, or let's say even since S.H.I.E.L.D. is disbanded, the Department of Mutant Affairs still exists, and Val wants to make sure everything is in line. So she and her partner, I will give her a mysterious little name. Now, I didn't talk about who I wanted to cast as Val Cooper. So, I think Val should be portrayed by Portia de Rossi. Now, obviously, we know her as being Ellen's wife. And there hasn't been a whole lot of her in the acting community as of late. I think she's a great actor. And I would love to see her take a claim on a role. And I think Val Cooper would be great. Even though it's a small part, they could still keep her around for many different things. Now, as far as Val's assistant slash partner, we're going to give her an assumed name because in a post-credits sequence, we're going to find out that she is actually Mystique. And I believe that Emmy Rossum from Shameless fame would be a fantastic Mystique. even as Raven Darkholm or whatever name they decide to give her, because if they introduce her as Raven Darkholm, everybody's going to know who she is. And I think to give a slight hint as far as who she is in that post credit sequence, or even at the end of the film, um, I think a nod to who she is would be great, but we can't introduce her as Raven Darkholm. So that way, when this reveal happens, everybody's gonna go, "Oh yes, so cool." Okay, so that is my interpretation of what I feel the first MCU X-Men movie should be about, who I would love to cast in the roles, and I just almost forgot another post-credit sequence. And we're going to travel to Africa, where we have Storm. Now, there have been possible rumors that she could be the first mutant introduced into the MCU via Black Panther. And if that is the case, that would be kind of cool. But her introduction should be in a post-credit sequence of the first X-Men film, and then tie her into the MCU that way. And I feel that she should be portrayed by Janelle Monáe. Now, I have to say that that credit actually goes to Grace Randolph from Beyond the Trailer, a wonderful channel on YouTube. If you have not checked it out, if you're a movie buff, if you're a comic buff, if you're a comic book movie buff, she has everything under wraps. So she's amazing. Love her. And she was the one who actually put this casting choice out there. Now, Janelle hasn't actually done a whole lot of acting, but she was phenomenal in the movie Moonlight, also starring Mahershala Ali. And I believe that she would be wonderful in the role if she can pull off the accent. Not sure whether that's possible or not, because we've already seen so many wonderful African American actors portrayed in Black Panther. So you want somebody of high caliber, and we don't want another Halle Berry. And while I thought that Alexandra Shipp did a really good job with what she was given with for Storm in X-Men Apocalypse, there's a little bit of room that she might grow in Dark Phoenix, but that's all going to get wiped away anyway. So Janelle Monáe as Storm in a post-credit sequence, and there we have our first MCU X-Men movie. Jot your thoughts down below. What do you think of my casting choices? What do you think of my slightly underdeveloped plot for this film? And as always, love and light to you all.